What's up and welcome back to Bardown Talking Hockey episode number 116 presented by the Barroom Network. My name is Vinnie Parisi and I am super excited for the 2023 NHL Draft. And this right here, this is Frankie Mueller. And unlike me, his favorite team has a pick in the first round. In fact, they have two. They might get three. We will see what happens. Frank, how you doing?
Doing great. Got a little bit of a lighting issue today, but nothing I could do about it.
Listen, you look great.
I appreciate that.
You need one of these $1 lights from the dollar store, but we'll get into all that in just a little bit. Joining us now as a very special guest of the program is somebody who I became a very big fan of on Twitter a couple weeks ago. One of my biggest regrets in life is not becoming a fan sooner because I enjoy his content and the way he looks at drafting and developing and, certain numbers that support different ways to look at hockey and all sorts of things. Of course, I am talking about the creator of Hockey Prospecting, NHL draft consultant, Byron Bader. Byron, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Very, very good. Thank you for joining our program.
No problem.
So, to get things started, I want to know, how did all this come about? How did hockey prospecting and all that, where did it come from in your brain, and how did you bring it to the table?
I've always kind of been like an analytical guy. Ever since I was a little kid, I've always loved stats and stuff, and I work in that field, kind of 9 to 5 anyways, doing analytics and, the private sector. So I've always been into, hockey stats and that type of thing. And basically it started, I was writing for Flames Nation, which is like a, analytics kind of centered blog about the Calgary Flames. So I was just writing different stuff about them and looking into different stuff about the team. And there was this thing called an NHL equivalency, which essentially is, there's these 50 different leagues that players can theoretically come from. And when you relate it back to their scoring related to their NHL scoring, each league is different. So like a point, in the OHL is different from what a point is worth in college. And that's different from like the Pro Euro League. So it kind of started there. And it was this really interesting concept that existed for a few years. And you're looking at players and how they performed in their year before they made the NHL, and then how they performed in the NHL, and you kind of take this average and the score pops up. And so it kind of started there, and it basically started, I was looking at Johnny Gaudreau when he was coming up, and he just had this really sky-high equivalency, and I was wondering, is that what a future star or superstar looks like? Do they tend to have these really high equivalencies? And basically, that was kind of my hunch, but I couldn't really find anything sort of proving the fact. So I just started digging through, Hall of Famers, and then I started digging through first rounders, and it was kind of proven out that the younger that you sort of hit these big milestones or these big thresholds, the more likely you are to turn into a star. So then, I started off with first rounders from the last 10 years, and then I went back 20 years, and then I wanted to just see the whole population. So I just basically started getting all the data slowly, and then scraping some of it and that type of thing, until I had basically 30 years of history that you can look at it, and these very distinct patterns and archetypes come out of what a star tends to look like. I mean, there's always outliers that kind of come out of nowhere that you would think this guy's never going to be a star, and then he turns into one, but a lot of them sort of follow this pattern. So then I built this out and, started tweeting about it and started, working with some teams around draft time. And then, I built out this website and created these tools for the public to access. So it started probably, about 6 years ago now, and then just kind of evolved into this thing that people are pretty interested in. So.
I love dissecting stats trends for players. I think it's fascinating. But what are some of your favorite stats or trends that you're able to pull from hockey prospecting that you really love to use to analyze some of the top prospects in the NHL? Because I know you guys go deep and dive into all the different stats and trends.
I mean, for mine personally, like I basically use that, that equivalency metric, looking at all these different leagues, because then you can put all these, these hundreds of players that are coming up every draft, and you're saying this guy's producing at this level in high school, and this guy's doing, he's not producing very much in, a top tier Euro league, and then this guy's doing this in the OHL. Like, what's good and what's bad? So this basically takes, those 300, 400 players that teams are legitimately looking at every year and puts them all on the same level playing field. So you can see them all in the same place. And then it adds in, age adjusters and that type of thing to see, okay, these guys are, equal on this playing field in terms of their equivalency, but this guy is 6 months younger than this guy, and that can make a huge difference. So, I mean, that's really how I look at it. That's how my data sort of works, and there's all sorts of tools around it. You can look back in history and you can see, which teams have had the most success at drafting. The way the site works is it's predicting whether the player is going to be a star. So that's like an offensive star, an elite point producer, call it, and then whether or not they're going to make the NHL. So you can look back and see at all these teams and what their success rates were and what they were drafting, what type of players they were drafting. So that's how my stuff works. And then I love, looking at other people's tools, like, the people at Elite Prospects are always really good, and they have different stuff to look at and they're different tracking and stuff, just to kind of look to see, if I have a guy that's looks really good in the model, but then in these other trackings, he looks pretty pedestrian or mediocre. That's stuff to consider, just like when I'm doing rankings and stuff. But yeah, my tool is basically based on this idea of the equivalency and putting everybody on the same level playing field, so you can see all these players all at once, and you can compare them back to history and compare, over the last 30 years, like players coming up in the draft who looked like these guys and what was like the overall success rate and all that stuff. So that's kind of how my site works and basically how it looks at players.
That's really cool. And one of the things that intrigued me when I first came across the data is you went through, one of the tweets I liked was you went through like the last 30 Stanley Cup champions or whatever, and you described how many of those teams had and you had the runner-ups as well, and how many of those teams had a true star, and then how many players on that particular team in that particular year had quote-unquote star seasons. What's the difference between the two? What makes you a star? What makes you have a star season?
Yeah, so the stars are these players I'm talking about. So it's essentially, outlier, top 10% point producer over their whole career. So they have to play at least 200 games. And essentially for a forward, it's like basically like 60 points in 82 games, like every year. They consistently hit it. And then for a defenseman, it's roughly like 40, 45 points a year plus. So what that's looking at is for runner-ups and the cup winners, it's looking at how many true stars do they have on their team. So like legitimate career stars, like they're a star, almost every season in and season out. Whereas the star seasons, you always have these guys that have like their career year. It often happens when they go to the cup final. You have like a lot of these guys. So, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive groups, because the guys having the true stars most likely are having the star seasons as well. They might have a drop-off year, but most of the time they're going to be in that list as well. And then you have these extra guys that are having like they're hitting the qualifications of a star season, but they're not actually stars themselves. They're like an average producer that's just, generating a crazy amount of points in that particular year. Like you look at like a guy like Tyler Toffoli this year for the Flames. He is not a legitimate star by my model. He's kind of on the fringe or kind of close. But this year he had, almost like a superstar season. He just had his craziest year of all. So that's basically the difference between it. When you look back at cup winners and the runner-ups, they tend to have a ton of stars on their team. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but star power gets you to the cup final and star power gets you cups. You have these teams that are kind of these like one-off examples where they don't really have any star power at all, but then they make it to the cup final on these miracle runs, but then they never actually end up winning it. It's always, it tends to be the teams that have the stars that win it in the long run. So that's kind of what that analysis was about.
Yeah, Vin, I'm glad you brought it up because I saw that too and I was going to ask him about it. But so if you're a true star, could you not be a true star like next season, or do you kind of earn that rank, or how does that
Yeah,
work?
exactly. So it's kind of, you could fall out of it, right? Because you could, I'm looking at, have they basically played 200 games, and do they have this sort of, point per game metric over that whole career? So they could kind of just barely qualify and then fall out of it next year.
Interesting.
So that's kind of the moving part of the model. Like a good example is Carter Verhaeghe for Florida. He just barely counts. Like he's actually a true star. He just made it this year. I think he's at maybe 220 games or something, and he just barely counts. But if he has an off year next year, he's going to kind of fall out of that. But most of the time they're, a little bit over that. And I have another another part of that analysis was you could be a true star, like, when you retire, you're going to be considered a star in the model, like a guy like Joe Thornton. He's a superstar basically his whole life. But when he went off to like Toronto and Florida, he wasn't a star anymore. So he's not counting anymore because he's just like a 40-year-old putting up 20 points playing on the fourth line. So there's stuff like that I'm kind of adjusting for in that analysis. But
I like your thing with Joe Thornton there, kind of on the back end of his career. Now I'm curious about, I was literally just about to ask about someone who's kind of on the opposite spectrum, like the front end of their career. Of course, Jack Hughes. He had a breakout season this year, 99 points. Last year we saw flashes of it, but there were injuries that took him out for large chunks of the season at a time, but he still ended with roughly 60 points, and he was over point per game on the season and 25 goals, all that. Is he somebody who is now considered a star, or is he still a year away from needing a 60-point season or so to, reach that? God, he better get 60 points next season. But you know what I mean? Like, is he already there, or does he have a little bit to go, a guy like that?
No, he's already crossed over, and he's like really interesting when you look at him in the model, because he actually looks in the model very similar to a guy like Connor Bedard. He has kind of this generational profile about him, looking at before he ever played an NHL game, looking at his pre-draft production and then his draft year production. Guys that look like that, there's only probably about 15 of them, and every single one of them that's ever looked like that has been basically like a point per game or just shy of a point per game superstar. So Jack Hughes is in that variety. So he's actually one of these only ones where he didn't hit the NHL and then immediately become like basically a superstar, like Crosby and McDavid and Eichel, and even guys like Paul Kariya that have that same look. They basically hit the NHL and they're amazing right away. So he didn't. So he kind of made me a bit nervous, because in the model he looks like a for sure superstar, and then sure enough, you get to like his third season, he takes off like a rocket, and yeah, he's definitely already there. He's already a star, and now there's another sort of extra threshold I put in there just to pick up on these superstar guys, which are basically like these point per game guys. So now he's heading towards that path.
Yeah, that's awesome. That stuff to me is so fascinating. Something else that I've noticed on your Twitter is you like to compare prospects with each other. But is there any underrated draft prospects that teams should be on the lookout later in the first round? I know me and Vinny talk a lot about Gavin Brindley going middle to late of the first round, but is there anybody else that, teams should really keep their eyes peeled for?
Yeah, there's a few guys that I think will certainly drop past like, the midway point of the first round. So like Andrew Cristall, he's a guy out of the WHL, smaller guy, insane production. He's not a great skater, especially for a small guy. So that's kind of the knock on him. But like when you look at guys that profile like that and have that type of standardized, normalized score in their pre-draft year and then their draft year, like 90% of them make the NHL and half of them turn into stars. And, the other ones that make the NHL, maybe if they're not a star, they're like definitely like a middle six rotation guy. So he could drop into like the 20s or something. He's a really good one. And then another one is Russian defenseman, Mikhail Gulyayev. He plays in like the Russian junior league, the MHL, and he looks amazing. Like his profile in the model is very, very rare, and he looks really elite. And he's small. He's 5'10", so that's going to be a knock. He's Russian, that's going to be another knock. But like he skates incredible. Like he skates, like Lane Hudson and like Olin Zellweger, who are these two other smaller defensemen that dropped out of the first round the last 2 years. So he could be the next one, and I really like him.
Very interesting. You bring up a Russian player. I was going to ask, is every team not named the Chicago Blackhawks going to one day regret not drafting Matvei Michkov? Or I can even extend it to the Anaheim Ducks. I know people debate Fantilli versus Michkov, but there might be some teams that take a Will Smith or a Benson or someone like that over Michkov due to the fear of him not coming over for a while. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some teams that regret it because he, it sounds like everybody's a generational talent, but he also looks exactly like Bedard and Jack Hughes and Connor McDavid. He has that same profile. So again, 100% of these guys have hit the NHL and have become point per game superstars in the NHL. So that's what you're looking at in Michkov. So yeah, he's probably going to fall a little bit. The the other part is this is such a deep draft that, if you're drafting in the top 5 and you don't take him, you're probably not going to get hosed and take like a guy that's not going to make the NHL, or you're going to get like a pretty mediocre or average player. Like even Benson, Will Smith, Leo Carlson, like these are probably going to be like really, really good players. They profile well in the model. They look good. They're probably going to end up pretty good, but you could be walking away from Ovechkin, Malkin, Kaprizov type production, and it's going to take a bit before he comes over, like probably, at least that kind of 3 years, but you could be missing out on that. And then in 10 years, really be kicking yourself for sure.
Yeah. At Hockey Prospecting, you guys got him rated at 3. Do you think he falls out of the top 10? Because that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. I don't think he's going to go 3rd to the Blue Jackets, but I want your opinion on that. Does he go 3rd or fall out of the top 10?
I don't think he'll fall out of the top 10. I could see him potentially falling out of the top 5. Just, maybe because the team's nervous about the Russian thing, and then is he going to come over? But, he probably will. But, there's a bit of a risk there. But, I mean, it's – you don't get normally a prospect that makes the NHL and has an impact before they're kind of 3 years removed from the draft anyway. So, I could see him falling to maybe, I've heard a lot about Washington is sort of, if he falls out of the top 5, like Washington's for sure going to take him type thing. So I don't think he'll make it past that, but who knows? It is such a deep draft, and there's so many picks on the table that you maybe take, a lesser but safer, North American option or something like that, right? So I figure he'll probably go in kind of the 4 to 7 or 4 to 8 hole would be my guess.
My prediction since the draft lottery, and we knew the order, has been Philly, because they're at the beginning of a rebuild. Like they're not even really at the beginning yet. They're like in the negative years of the rebuild. They still got pieces to move, like Carter Hart. We'll see if they keep Konechny or guys like that, Kevin Hayes, all sorts of players that they can move off of. They're going to be in the Max Celebrini sweepstakes, in my opinion, which is why somebody like, Michkov could be a perfect fit for them if he all of a sudden shows up in 3 years. Like, wow, the Flyers are really looking good. Do you have early thoughts on Max Celebrini as he gets ready to enter his draft year? Or are there any other prospects that you think could challenge him based on this at this point in time? Or are we just not there yet?
No, I don't think so. I think he's going to be the first overall pick. He looks insane already. Like I don't, I'm aware of the guys coming up in the next draft, but I don't look at their numbers too closely because most people don't look that incredible in their pre-draft year. So, once I start looking at them for the 2024 class, like, around November, December, when I start kind of getting my first list, then I start to bring in their numbers and then I can kind of see. But him, everybody's been talking about him, everybody's watching him. And so I've looked him up, and he looks like that, again, generational variety, like early out of the gates, or at least close to. So I don't think anybody's going to beat him out.
Switching topics from forwards to defense. I mean, defensemen are normally hot commodities relatively early in the first round of any NHL draft. But, defense plays a huge part in the NHL, and you need good defenders if you're looking to build a Stanley Cup winning team. It appears that there might not be a top defenseman in this year's draft going in the top 10. Will this be the year that a D-man doesn't go in the top 10?
Yeah, I kind of tweeted about that. Like I was kind of looking through the drafts and I couldn't find any in basically the last 30 or so years where that happened. And then I tweeted about it, and then somebody mentioned that 1983, the Steve Yzerman draft, that's when it last happened. So, based on that, probably somebody goes in the top 10, a D-man will go, but like, who's it going to be? I mean, the forward class here is just so much richer than the D class, and you kind of know what you're getting into, that it's going to be interesting to see, which team thinks, oh, I'm going to pass on this, forward offensive stud, and I'm going to take this maybe little bit of a gamble and take this D-man a bit earlier. It could be somebody like Reinbacher is probably most likely, I would say. Yeah, but I don't know. This might be the year that it finally happens, that it's 10 straight forwards out of the gate type thing. But I don't know who's going to take that risk, I guess.
For sure. I'm curious on your thoughts on last year's draft. So the 2022 NHL draft kind of didn't go the way anybody thought it was going to. Shane Wright ended up falling to the 4th overall pick. He only played, 7 games this season with the Seattle Kraken. Spent most of the year kind of flipping back and forth between the AHL, his junior team, World Juniors. He played all over the place. And Slavkovsky didn't have that great of a season with the Montreal Canadiens. We saw Luke Hughes and Nemec, or not Luke Hughes, just Nemec in the Devils system. What's your take on this 2022 draft a year later?
Yeah, I think when you look back at it, especially 10 years removed, when you can kind of say for sure what the player is and who made the NHL and who didn't and stuff, it's going to look very strange. I mean, I've talked about it quite a bit on Twitter, but Slavkovsky specifically, the way he looks is not at all like a guy who normally goes first overall. He looks like a guy, he's got the size and he can kind of work the corners and he's massive and he's got some offense to him, but it doesn't really show up in terms of his production. So a guy like that is normally a guy that goes, maybe at the back end of the top 10 into the teens. And he goes first overall. And he was actually the lowest value first overall forward, I think, the model has ever seen. So since 1990, he just didn't have that look. And then sure enough, he came in this year. And like you said, it was, nothing earth shattering. Made the NHL right away, but, there was nothing, from the production side, there was nothing crazy there. Yeah. And then, you have Shane Wright, who's kind of talked about, a couple years before the draft as sort of maybe a potential, elite or generational piece himself, because he got that, exempt status and he was in the OHL and he did really well with it. But then he missed his entire draft year and you're kind of, or his pre-draft year, I guess. And then you're kind of taking a gamble with him. So, yeah. So I still think he's going to be really good. I think he probably should have gone 1 or 2. And then the Nemec one was really surprising because I was all over Nemec. He has this very, very elite profile. It basically looks like, the superstar generational profile for a D-man. And so I was talking about him early in the year and I figured he'd maybe go 4th or 5th, that type of thing. And then the Devils come right up and take him at 2, ahead of Shane Wright and Cooley. And it was wow, they're really see something promising in him. So yeah, I think when you look back at the draft, it's going to be pretty wonky, especially in the top 5. It's just going to look really weird and how the players work out and stuff. There's going to be oh my God, I can't believe we didn't take that first overall. I think that could happen, especially with Nemec and Cooley, because I think they're kind of most likely to pop. And then Wright as well. He looks a bit odd in the model, but part of it is he missed his pre-draft year, which set him back a little bit. So yeah, I think it's going to look weird for sure.
I think there's a couple teams going into next season that are going to maybe surprise us. But is there anybody that you think is going to really struggle, mostly due to the fact that they don't have the right prospects in their farm system yet, or just, they're not being built the right way going into the next season or, seasons beyond? Is there anybody that sticks out to you that, maybe falter a little bit?
I think the Penguins and the Bruins could drop back a bit or quite a bit because they've been making these kind of playoff runs on these cores that are, 15 years old for years and years and years. And I mean, Bruins had the best regular season ever last year. And then of course they're out in the first round, but they've been riding these cores forever. And now a lot of these guys are in their mid-30s. So they're going to start to fall off. And in terms of their prospects, they have almost nothing. Both of them have very little in terms of guys that will even make the NHL, let alone guys that should come in and have a pretty massive offensive impact. So I could see them falling off quite a bit.
Fair.
I could see Florida falling back too. I mean, they barely made the playoffs this year, but their decor just doesn't scream deep enough to me that I could kind of see them kind of being the surprise team that falls off and maybe doesn't even make the playoffs again next year. Those would be three that kind of come to my head. Yeah.
For sure. I like those answers. And, I want to ask one more question kind of in the opposite way and with my personal bias showing. The Devils had a top 5 season in the regular season points wise. And a lot of metrics support the fact that they were just very good. They created on the rush. They used their speed. They liked to take advantage of your mistakes. They liked to pump shots on goal at times. And they also have a top 5 farm system, according to lots of different, publications out there. I'm not sure exactly where they fall on your model, but they were, I think the Athletic had them at 2. The Athletic had them at 2, and obviously
I think I have them at 2 or 3, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and, with Nemec and Luke Hughes leading the way, they have Alexander Holtz, a bunch of other good players. Do you think they can win a cup in the next 5 years? I know that's like crazy to predict. Like, oh yeah, this team could win the cup, but like very few top 5 teams have a top 5 farm system. Like the Wild were the closest, and they weren't a top 5 team; they were a top 10 team, but they had a top 5 farm system. So, like, I don't know.
I think so. I mean, I've been all about the Devils fan train for the last couple of years because they've just been kind of, they went through like the hard rebuild where they had nothing and then they had no stars. And then now all of a sudden they've got, I think 5. So they have Hamilton, Hughes, Hischier, Meyer, and Bratt. So they've got that, like, once you have like 5 stars, that's where you're like, you turn yourself into a contender. That's what that earlier research is kind of showing with the Stanley Cup contenders. But then also just looking at teams that make the playoffs and make it deep in the playoffs. 5 stars is like the golden grail. They already have that. And then they have 2 of the best, offensive, defensive prospects in the world that haven't even really played yet. And, they have some other good pieces in there. Like, I was reading some stuff today that Hellebuck wants to go there. Like if they get that and they get that like star level goalie that can save games, but then doesn't even need to most of the time anymore, like he had to a lot of the times in Winnipeg, I think they're going to do some damage over the next 5 years for sure. Maybe they won't win a cup, but I think they'll be like in that conversation.
Is it possible to have 7 stars? Like if Nemec and Hughes reach that threshold, or does Dougie Hamilton have to fall out? Like,
no, it's possible, but I kind of talked about this on Twitter as well. Is like the ecosystem and the salary cap doesn't allow for a team to hold 7 stars for multiple seasons because you just have to owe so much money that you're going to have to trade somebody, or the ice time just doesn't come around enough that maybe like somebody kind of on the fringe, like a Bratt or a Hischier, falls out. Hamilton's so far above it that he probably stays in the mix. But yeah, I would say like sustaining 7 or more stars for more than like 2 seasons is probably almost impossible, just because it comes down to money and ice time and all that type of stuff. But 5 to 6, you can run that ship for a pretty long time, depending on how you have your contract structured and where the guys are in terms of their age and if they're on their first contract or their second contract, third contract, that type of stuff. But yeah, the fact that you have 2 other pieces that are going on their ELCs that have some of the highest star probabilities for defensemen out of anybody who basically hasn't played any NHL game, like that's just incredible. So
that's awesome.
I'm high on the Devils doing some damage over the next 5 years.
Cool. Yeah, just one last question I want to ask you. Just Vinny had his little bias, and we could talk about Bedard till the cows go to sleep or whatever you want to call it. But what did you think of the Vegas Golden Knights Stanley Cup championship run? Because they're my second team. I love the Vegas Golden Knights. I want to get your opinion because I saw you tweeting about that as well when they were playing. Yeah,
I mean they like compared to when they made their run in 2018. Was that 2018? Yeah, 2018. Yep. They were sort of these miracle teams I talk about. Like there's a couple of them. There's Vegas in 2018. There's Montreal in 2021. And then there's like the Calgary Flames in 04, and then Florida Panthers in 1996. These are these miracle teams that like didn't have any stars on them, or they had like one or two, and they make this run all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, and then they end up losing in the Stanley Cup Finals. So now Vegas is sort of more mature, and they've made all these trades. They've acquired, through free agency or through trade, they've acquired Stone and Pietrangelo and Eichel, obviously. But then also these guys that were having star seasons in 2018, they've legitimately now, a lot of them, or a few of them, have turned into stars. So you have like Marchessault, and you have Shea Theodore, and they have one more star. I can't think of what his name is.
Is it You said who?
So you have Eichel, Pietrangelo, Stone. I think maybe they have 5. Yeah, they have 5. So anyway, so you have these couple guys that aren't just having star seasons anymore. Like they've turned that into star seasons year in and year out. Now they're legitimate stars. So now when they made the Cup final this time, they have, I think, 5 stars, and then I think they had 6 or 7 players with these star seasons, like exactly what a Stanley Cup winning team normally looks like. So yeah, it was a bit surprising that they kind of got through like that, but then when you break it down, like they're just kind of loaded everywhere. They're really deep, and they play like a really aggressive style that, that's what a winner looks like. That's what a cup winner looks like. So yeah, pretty cool story for them to kind of do all that over the span of 5-6 years and, turn into a legitimate contender and then actually win it. Like, you have all these teams that are always kind of doing these safe things and, I can't get involved with that trade because, that could cause this damage further on down the road. So they make like more of like a safer, B or C level trade. Whereas Vegas every year is in there going for those A+ trades and demolishing their prospect system. But like, it worked. Like, are other teams going to try that? And are other teams going to go for it like they did? Because it worked perfectly for them. And now, they've got their cup so soon after starting. So yeah, it's a pretty cool story.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. They were in the Timo Meyer sweepstakes, and then the Devils got him, and I was like, okay, the Devils got him. Vegas can still win the cup without him. They don't need him. Let me get Meyer. Vegas, you take everything.
I don't know how they're in on everything, but they are. Like, it's just maddening. I don't know how, like, even when the Eichel thing was popping up, I was like, there's no way that they have the pieces to get Eichel. Of course, as a Calgary Flames guy, I was like, we have the pieces. We could do it. And then they sneak in there, and it's like, all right, they did it again.
You know what, though? I respect Calgary. Frank and I have talked a lot about Calgary on this show. They had to get rid of Matthew Tkachuk. He was leaving for nothing if they didn't. And instead of saying, you know what, we're going to rebuild, we're going to tear it all down and go for Bedard and go for Fantilli, Celebrini, whatever, they got Huberdeau in the trade, and they got Weegar as well. It didn't work out the best in year one, but I respect almost like not giving up and, going for it, even though they kind of were presented with a nasty situation.
Yeah, that was a tough couple weeks with Gaudreau and Tkachuk. So yeah, it was pretty impressive what they were able to get for Tkachuk. Other side, I'm disappointed that they didn't sign Tkachuk for 4 years ago, and they didn't re-up Gaudreau in the summer of 2021. But that's how she goes. But yeah, I mean, Huberdeau and Weegar are really good players, and I think they're going to bounce back a little bit. They still, when you look at the cup breakdowns and the star firepower that you need on a cup winner, the Flames still don't have it, but they have some pieces that may evolve into that. So I don't know. I remain optimistic, but I probably shouldn't be.
Absolutely. I remember Gaudreau didn't have the Flames logo on his helmet in the World Cup of Hockey. Like, it's always been a little fishy with him. But Byron, we can't thank you enough for coming on our show. It has been an absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I love getting down and dirty with hockey stats and projections and all that kind of stuff. Why don't you promote yourself and where people can find you and your work?
Yeah, so on Twitter, I'm at Byron M. Bader. So I post different stuff about the draft coming up and player cards and, yeah, just talking about the historical significance of everything. And then the website is hockeyprospecting.com. It's a subscription website, so it's $35 a year Canadian. So American, that's about 25, depending on the old exchange rate. And you can access all the tools. Goes back to 1990, so you have like 7,000 players in there to compare and contrast, and you can go back look at past drafts and, or look at, the past decade or whatever and see which teams have drafted the most stars and most NHLers and who's had the most success rates and that type of stuff. So it's all on there, all inclusive for that price. And that's where you can find me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Byron. We hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll be looking forward to reading your tweets during the draft.
You betcha. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. That's Byron Bader from Hockey Prospecting, and we would like to send you to period number 2. I didn't send it to period number 1.
Oh, I
don't do that, or I've done that often with guests. This week it was by design. I did it on purpose because I wanted to get into it as fast as we could, because I knew we only had a limited amount of time with Byron today. And I know it's like 3 seconds and it doesn't make that, but like I was just so hyped to get into it. I did do it by design today.
The extra 4 seconds would have broke the bank, huh?
I honestly think so. I probably wouldn't have got that last question in about the Devils being sick. You hear him say that shit about Hughes? Hughes is just as good as Bedard. You heard it from the man himself. You heard it from the man himself.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah, well, we'll see. They'll probably be about even, to be honest with you. Like, what's the difference between, Hughes will probably have 110 points and he'll take 1 penalty on the season and it'll be a face-off violation or something, and he'll lead the Devils in takeaways. But Bedard will have 115 points. Most of them, or more than half, he'll be a 50-goal man, but, like, he probably roughs it up just a tad bit more is my so what's the difference? What would you rather have? The answer is both. They're both sick. I love it. I loved that entire conversation. That was one of my favorite guests we've ever had. And Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, I do not say that very often on this show.
Yeah, you're right. No, he's a good guest. I mean, I like diving into the stats and the analytics of hockey players and, players to come, players of the past. I think it's fascinating. So it was really nice.
Yeah, it was
now
cool.
Foster gained a new friend too. He said he's got a new guy to follow. So
follow him on Twitter at Byron and Bader. Very, very good follow. You learn a lot about hockey. Like, I wrote it low in the period 2.
I was going to ask if you wanted to start it because it just came out.
Yeah, we're going to start with it. I didn't know those things usually come out at like 5 o'clock.
I knew it was coming out at 2 or 2:30 or whatever it was.
I knew it was coming out at 2 at 1. Last night when I wrote the sheet, I had no clue what time it was coming out. So today, when I saw it was coming out at 2, I was like, okay, we're going to freaking move this to the beginning. And of course, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Colton in the chat wanted to know where he could watch the Hall of Fame announcement. It was on TSN, and I don't know if it was broadcast anywhere in the U.S. NHL Network might have carried the TSN broadcast. They do that frequently. But in case you don't know, the 2023 Hall of Fame class is Henrik Lundqvist, Tom Barrasso, Pierre Turgeon, Mike Vernon, Caroline Ouellette, and those are all players. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Coach Ken Hitchcock and Pierre Lacroix, a general manager, they were both entered in as builders. So it's a big class. Frank, what do you take away from this class?
I'm not surprised with Henrik Lundqvist. I thought he was an absolute lock when I saw, the eligible nominees for the Hall of Fame this year. I figured he'd get in for sure. Some of the other names I saw, and biasly, of course, I wanted Corey Crawford, but I had a feeling Corey Crawford wasn't going to make it. Justin Williams was another guy who he was on the fence for me. I mean, he has 3 Stanley Cups, 2 World Championships. I mean, he had a great career, but is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? No, not really, if you think about it. Not surprised by Lundqvist, like I said, though. A lot of people, I'm reading the comments of the NHL's post. A lot of people are upset about Patrick Elias, Zetterberg, some of the other names that are scrolling through. It's just, yeah, I mean, I'm not really surprised. Ken Hitchcock, absolutely. Great. I mean, we've seen him, freaking with the Blues, giving the Hawks headaches for years. Very deserving class, I would have to say. I got to be honest, though, some of these guys, I don't know who they are. So I'm not going to touch on them. But, yeah.
Yeah, well, Henrik Lundqvist was a lock. He is a outstanding goaltender in his career. He's one of the best goalies ever. I'm pissed Patrick Elias didn't make it again. I mean, I fired off some tweets this morning with reasons why Elias should be in the Hall of Fame. 408 goals, 617 assists, 1,000 points. He was a Selke type winger, which you don't see very often. Like you think of Mark Stone and Marian Hossa. Like Patrick Elias was just like them. Like there's a reason he was their best forward on 2 cup winning teams, so a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. He's the all-time leading scorer of a team that won 3 Stanley Cups and has been around for 40 years. You know, I hope Jack Hughes ends with more than 1,025 points and he'll become the greatest forward in Devils history. Shit, even he sure could end up with those types of numbers. But like, you know, that's a hockey Hall of Famer, and he's been on the list for a long time now. You know, I'm not saying he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. We're like in year 5 of Elias being on the thing. There are players that are far less productive in the Hall of Fame than him. I really don't get it. There were people pissed off about McGillney not making it. I thought Kachuk was making it for sure because it just seemed like there's always bias that goes into Hall of Fame voting. Like if Lundqvist had his exact same career with the I don't know, the freaking Dallas Stars, he probably would be a Hall of Famer eventually, but the way he's revered, a lot of it has to do with the fact that he was the king of New York. I do believe that. It happens in every sport. It's BS. But, you know, and so I thought that kind of narrative would sway in Keith Kachuk's way. He's been in the news a lot in the last year or so. Both of his sons are superstars in the NHL. They're both top 10 at their position. So I kind of thought he would get a little bit of love. I think Corey Crawford is a Hall of Famer. I had no expectations of him getting in this year. I'm not sure he ever will. If I would vote for him because a lot of his career numbers are very similar to Henrik Lundqvist, but he wasn't a superstar goalie. A lot of people's minds, he wasn't a Vezina guy or anything like that, but he did win the Stanley Cup twice. So, you know, a lot of people, the Hawk teams were so good. I think the fact that Crawford came onto a team that had already won the cup with that core with a worse goalie than him, and then he went on and won 2 more. Like I think that kind of hurts his case a little bit. But like I'm saying, I think he's a great Hall of Fame candidate too. He'll be on the list for a long time. But you know, that's my kind of take on the Hall of Fame. Henrik Lundqvist deserved it. I'm not surprised to see Ken Hitchcock make it. He's one of the great coaches who ever lived. The one time I ever laughed at Ken Hitchcock, Zach Parise scored a shorthanded goal against the Blues in the playoffs, and he like shot it from the goal line. He really wasn't even trying to score. He was just putting it on net, killing a penalty, and it beat Jake Allen. And Ken Hitchcock was looking at Jake Allen like, you mother, like, how did you let that in? And like, even Parise was like, really? It went in? And, you know, he's celebrating with a bunch of third pair D and a 4th line forward because, like, he was one of the only stars who would kill a penalty. And, you know, I always thought that clip was funny. Ken Hitchcock just looking at Jake Allen like, you mother. I'm pretty sure Elliott came in to that game. If I remember correctly, Brian Elliott came in and relieved Jake Allen. Like he couldn't have had a fun time dealing with Hitchcock after, you know, that. But, you know, I don't mind the Hall of Fame class. I have my issues with it with Elias, but, you know, congrats to everybody who made it. Everybody who makes it. I don't want to. Yeah, and I don't want to take away from anybody who did make it. So, you know, hopefully Elias gets in one of these years, though. And I want Crawford to get in one of these years. Justin Williams has no chance. I hate to.
You don't think so?
To poop on your parade. Yeah, no, he was never a, like, to me, a Hall of Famer, especially in hockey, is someone who was top 3 or 5 at their position for any 5-year, 10-year span. Like Elias was that. He was a top 5 winger in the league. Like, you never really looked at Justin Williams and saw him as a top 5 anything but like Mr. Game 7, right? You know,
top 5 and Mr.
Yeah,
Game 7.
yeah. He's probably top 1 Mr. Game 7, right? If we are not including coaches, Paul Maurice is undefeated in Game 7s, but as a coach. But like, you know, he did finally lose that one with Carolina to his old team Washington, where he picked up a couple Game 7 wins. But I mean, you know, he's a multi-time Stanley Cup champion. I believe he's a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. Justin Williams. Did you say that? He's got 2 with the Kings and then 1 with the Hurricanes, right? So like, he's a great player. I'm not poo-pooing Justin Williams, but you know, if Patrick Elias, Yeah, almost 800 points. Eliash has over 1,000, and he was a far better regular season player and postseason player than.
Yeah, but he's got almost 800 points, 3 cups, 2 world championships.
Yeah, I think those team awards they're like a tiebreaker for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are other 2-time Stanley, like Andrew Shaw has 2 Stanley Cups, and you know, guy, but he's probably got like 600 points. Like Justin Williams, if he has 100 more points than Andrew Shaw, but he's got the 2 cups, like, yeah, he was a great player. He was a great player, but he's not going to be a Hall of Famer. But I digress. This class was fun. Frank, your boys, the Vegas Golden Knights, they had a parade. I don't know if I'm going to call it like is it a legendary parade / rally? It might be.
It was crazy.
You know, it looked like a lot of people were there. There was people always post like they'll take one street that looks like it's light on people, and they'll be like, "This is the Vegas Golden Knights party." But then, like, you look at the rally and you see how many people were actually there in Las Vegas celebrating this thing. It looked pretty rad. I don't know if I would put it right there with the way Washington celebrated in 2018. That to me is the greatest championship parade in any sport ever. The Bucks came close, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, when Tom Brady almost broke the trophy, but that was also his 7th, and he finally let himself get drunk for the first time in his life. But I really enjoyed watching the Vegas parade, and man, Wild Bill, the speech Wild Bill gave, he was absolutely destroyed. It's like, this is a premier athlete. This is a premier athlete. I don't know. Well, Wild Bill's not a star on hockey prospecting, but he's a star in my brain because of how good he is defensively.
His speech was just so natural.
And
it gave you everything you wanted.
And who was that? The girl trying to get him off?
I was going to ask you. I think that was his significant other. I don't know if girlfriend, wife. Probably it's like you don't say anything stupid or you regret the next day.
Yeah.
Or you get in trouble. Like Wild Bill's canceled tomorrow, or like
like what is he gonna say?
Yeah, it's like all right, we got to stop this before it gets too
yeah.
It had everything. We talked about the first ever Golden Knights game against the Arizona Coyotes. He's like, yeah, I might not be good, but I was good in year 1. Like, it was just hilarious. Like, the stuff he was saying, it was just absolutely, it just felt natural, felt authentic, and it put a smile to my face when I saw it. Everybody else was enjoying it. Marsh was laughing out of his mind. I mean, they're all shirtless. Riley Smith's shirtless. Marsh is shirtless. I mean, they're just all having a good time. They're all probably drunk as well. Yeah, it was great.
Besides Wild Bill, was there any other clips from the parade that you want to talk about or get into?
There was something. Well, first of all, I just want to say Mark Stone raising the cup on stage and the crowd chanting his name. That just felt like a real special moment in the parade that day. I mean, if you think about it, some of the best moments from when the Blackhawks parades came around was like when the players were on stage giving speeches. It's like your captain's on stage, your first ever franchise Stanley Cup in history, and it's just something about the crowd chanting his name. It seemed like a special moment, but there was something earlier during the rally when they were cruising down I assume it was down the strip, and somebody asked Derek Englund a question, and I rewound the clip multiple times. I don't know his response, but it was something along the lines, because then the guy who was asking questions was like, it's right, take your time. And he's like, all right. And he pops open champagne and he's spraying the crowd and they're all laughing. But I don't know, that was pretty funny too. I wish I knew exactly what they said, but it just the whole interaction was hilarious.
That is funny. That is really funny. Well, the Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights certainly had a party. That was so fun to watch. Did your hat show up yet?
No, it was shipped yesterday.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Well, Frank, since our last show, our guy, my guy, yes, Babette,
it's my
signed
guy.
Your guy. Give me a
He
break.
is my guy. I've been talking nothing but good stuff about him the whole year. I always think he's the glue that holds everything together.
Yeah, he's the Devils' 5th best player.
That's all right. He's the glue, though.
Yeah, no, 100%. I don't disagree, and I'm so happy that because of this, he signed a 7.8 something $1 million contract to stay with the Devils for the next 8 years. He was a restricted free agent. He kind of said to Brat's camp, "Hey, if you don't sign a deal with us soon, I'm trading you." And Brat was like, "Well, I don't want to leave this team that's super sick and has a chance to win multiple cups in the next 10 years. I want to be here." And so they got it done. Um, we say $1 million per 10 points.
Yeah,
Right there.
perfect.
Right there. A lot of people thought he was going to get overpaid because I do believe Brat can be like a 90-point guy. And so people were thinking he was going to get 8-9 because of that potential, and pay him for what you think he's going to do. Well, they paid him for what he's done, and if he does become that 90-point guy, well, now he's one of the best bargains in the NHL if he's not already. And the Devils have Hischier, Hughes, and Brat all signed for the next 5 or more years each, and they're all making 8 or less. And other stars, McDavid is making 12. Draisaitl's a deal. He's at 8.5. But other stars around the league are over 10. All three of these guys will probably get to points where they're worth 10, and they got this with the Devils. Now they can fill out their depth a lot easier than some of the other elite teams across the league. I love this deal for Brat. I love this deal for the team. He's rich. They have a team-friendly deal. Luke Hughes and Nemec will be on team-friendly deals. You'd hope they try to win the cup during the duration of those team-friendly entry-level deals when they're not even making $1 million yet. But we'll see what happens. I love the Brat contract.
I love this deal. I mean, I still believe he is going to hold this core team together. Is he a Hischier? No. Is he a Hughes? No. But he doesn't have to be because he's Jesper frickin' Brat. And Tom Fitzgerald, he's thrilled to have Brat back. He recognizes that he's a key core player on this team and whose goal is to win the Stanley Cup and bring it to New Jersey, and that's what he's going to do. Nailed it on the head with the 10 points per million. And that's something we came up with. That's like, we didn't read that anywhere. We came up with the philosophy, 1 million per 10 points. And I stand by that, obviously within reason. But great deal. It's a great move for the Devils, and it could be a steal too along the way. If he has a 90-point season here or there, a couple of them in the next 8 years, then it's a big bargain. So good move by the Devils, and it's good to see him back with New Jersey.
Brat's just also great in all three ends of the ice too. So it's not all about offense for him. He scored 32 goals this season, I think, 73 points. 73 points in back-to-back years. I might bet an exact point total for him next year to hit 73 on the dot again. 3 years in a row. Let's do it, Jesper. No, we want more than that. And one thing I've noticed, Jack Hughes had like 25 even strength goals last year, which means his power play numbers are low for a player that good. If the Devils' power play at any point starts clicking in like a top 10, top 5%, we're talking about 100 points for Hughes and Hischier and 120 points for Hughes. Or Brat and Hischier, I mean, and then 120 points for Hughes. I'm being like an extra 20 points on the power play. Imagine that. Imagine each of those three picking up an extra, and with Timo Meier now for a full season, and he'll be comfortable. He'll have a training camp. He's got 1 year left on his deal. They're trying to crank out is he an RFA? He might have one. He has RFA, but he's arbitration eligible. So he has 1 year minimum with the Devils. But I think they're cranking out an 8-year deal as we speak. I could see it being announced before our next show. He'll probably get 8.5, right? Or 8, which is a slight overpay, but you got to do that to keep Meier. I'm all for having you got those three guys all signed for significantly less. If you throw Meier $1 million more to have this core together, I'm all for it. And with a productive power play, this team could really see these guys reach new heights in terms of point totals, and that includes Brat. Got to get the goalie. Got to get the goalie.
And Byron mentioned a Hellebuck potentially. I mean,
Hellebuck said, "I want to play for the Devils."
There you go. Gotta make it happen.
Insane. I wouldn't give him 9.5.
You wouldn't what? I don't know.
I wouldn't give him 9.5 for 8 years.
No.
He's 30.
Yeah,
he's 30. I can't do it.
6.5 for 8 years?
Yeah, tomorrow. I drive him to New Jersey from Winnipeg. I
I
would
think
drive
6.5
to
is
Winnipeg
like,
from Chicago.
I think six and a
Yeah,
half is like the max in my opinion. I don't
yeah,
think
but
that long.
he's worth 9.5 for 3. I would do that. I would absolutely do that. Then when that contract's over, Akira Schmid's only like 24.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's
Yeah,
and that's when goalies tend to start to hit their peak more or less. So I I would trade for him. I wouldn't extend him for too long unless it's a long deal but less money. The Devils can win the cup if they like Hellebuck's a Vezina candidate nominee, isn't he?
hmm
He's not going to win it, but isn't it? Isn't it Allmark, Sorokin, and Hellebuck?
I think you're right. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's Allmark, Sorokin, and Hellebuck, which we're going to go through and pick because the NHL awards will be our next show, or they'll be over by our next show. So we'll get to that, but I think the world of what the Devils are doing, and I'm happy they got Bratt
hmm
signed long term. Frank, the Philadelphia Flyers released some new sweaters. What's
hmm
your take?
I think they're gorgeous, to be honest with you. I really, really love them. Burnt orange making its long awaited return to the Flyers jersey. And if there's anybody out there that cares, IBX will be the Flyers jersey sponsor this year. But there's just something about them. The home jerseys have the perfect amount of orange and white. I love that the main front of the jersey is orange and the sleeves are white. And the roads are just inverted from the home jerseys. And the numbers on the road jersey sleeves are right white with orange sleeves. Or no. Yeah, it's inverted. So orange sleeves, white front. Um, Numbers on the back are orange. I don't know. They really look nice. I would consider getting one if I was going to get a Flyers jersey. I like them that much. I think it really looks great.
Yeah, well, I think they're great as well. There's not a lot of difference. Sometimes it seems like the Flyers always release these jerseys and proclaim them as like these brand new things, but really they're just like slightly modified versions of their old ones. But I actually really think these ones are sharp. And I do agree on the burnt orange. I think the burnt orange is nice. They're going to look like hot Cheetos out there. It's
Yeah.
going to look delicious. So I'm all for what the Flyers have done with their new sweaters. They're with Danny Briere and Keith Jones and all of the things that are going on with the Flyers right now. It seems like they're a team moving in a completely new direction, and they'll be in Max Celebrini sweepstakes next year. If they all of a sudden in 2025 have Michkov and Celebrini, entering their prime, the Flyers are going to be very good. I'm worried about the Flyers long term. So I really do like what they're doing. They're going to look good while doing it. Frank, a trade
Absolutely.
candidate that just recently came out is Mr. Alex DeBrincat. He doesn't seem to want to re-sign in Ottawa, which I don't really know why. I would want to re-sign in Ottawa. I know it's probably not the best. They were just sold. It's Ottawa. It's Canada. It's whatever. I would want to stay there for hockey purposes, but he doesn't seem to want to. What's your take?
It's going to be a hot commodity over this next week. He said he's not willing to sign a long-term extension with the Ottawa Senators. That means Ottawa's most likely going to want to move him before the draft next week, so they could potentially have extra picks in this year's draft. Does he possibly go to a team like the Hurricanes, who could use a little more depth on their team? I mean, I didn't realize this, but they haven't had a top 10 score in the NHL in over 10 years, which is just insane. Does he want to go to a team that could use a little more depth there? Does he want to go to a team like the Red Wings? He grew up a Michigan native and a Red Wings fan. I mean, I'm sure they would be a great fit for him, or maybe even a team like the Pittsburgh Penguins to try and win one final cup with Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. I mean, Kyle Dubas made it clear he intends to keep their contention window open as long as the main core players are there. So, I mean, there's a lot of available teams for him to go to. It's just who's going to be willing to give up something in this year's draft, because I know for a fact they're going to want to get it done by next Wednesday.
I completely agree. And he was traded during draft week last year. I'm going to be writing my articles and stuff about, him getting traded to the Blackhawks and stuff, because that would be fun if he made a return. You wouldn't have to give up what you got in order to get him. He's certainly not going to be as expensive as he was with his, new trade. But I agree with you on Detroit. I have another team. I can see the Dallas Stars going for Alex DeBrincat. he fits what they're doing in so many ways, and they're going to lose some money this offseason. Like they're just going to be able to make, and they have assets to make a trade like that happen. Dallas they're pushing their luck on winning the cup with what they got because their depth players are all former stars, like not Dallas stars, like superstars. Joe Pavelski, Tyler Seguin, Jamie Benn. Those are all guys who used to carry teams, and now they're their depth players. And that is a nice recipe. I do think that that's like a good thing. And if they can bring in Alex DeBrincat to play with Jason Robinson and Rupe Hintz, that could be a team that is awesome. And they're going to be one of the teams I think pushing hard for Alex DeBrincat.
For sure.
So we'll see where he goes. Frank, we got a couple contracts to touch on here. Monahan stays with the Habs, $1.9 million. He's pretty much stunk for the last 3 years.
Yeah, after the 2019-2020 season, his production really took a turn for the worse. But, this 1-year contract for $1.9 million with the Habs, I think this is a great opportunity to earn a larger contract after this 1-year deal is up. I mean, he's only 28 years old. And if he's capable of putting together a nice 3 to 5 year deal after this, if he could prove to get back to the top production we saw before 2019, I mean, I think this is a great opportunity for him. And this is also a great move by the Montreal Canadiens. They're paying him less than $2 million for a guy that they will probably flip at the trade deadline. So, you're banking on him, try to get maybe 50 points at best, which is a stretch given the way he's played lately. But, he's been injured and you never know. Flip him at the trade deadline, see what you could get from him. And then next year's draft. I mean, I think this is a big win for the Montreal Canadiens in all honesty.
I do too. We'll see. Part of me thinks like he could have a resurgence of sorts at some point, but we'll see if that ever ends up happening. I don't know. The Habs are going to stink again, but they're not going to be like as bad. They're progressing. I like what the Habs are doing.
He's going to be trade bait for him at the end of during the trade deadline. I guarantee it.
Yeah. If anybody wants him, he'll be easier to trade at the 1.9. So, as completely different from his last contract. But Zemgus Girgensson stays with the Sabres 1 year, $2.5 million. I like this deal even more because he's making $1 million more than Monahan, but he produces almost no offense. He never really has. But he's a stout defensive bottom six forward that you would want to have in your bottom six in most situations.
He's also the longest serving active player on the team. This is going to be his 10th season with the Sabres. And like you said, he's one of the team's top defensive forward. He's a trusted penalty killer. He's a leader in the locker room. And the past 2 seasons, he served as the team's alternate captain. So bringing Girgenson's back on a 1-year deal to a young up-and-coming team is great. It's great to have a guy like this on the team. And the players obviously love having him around. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that if he hit the open market, there'd be teams inquiring about him. So, I mean, he's just one of those guys you want to have on the team.
Absolutely. He kind of paved the way for John Scott to make the All-Star game, too.
Yeah, no, I remember.
People often forget that. Buffalo and the entire country of Latvia joined forces to get Girgensons to the All-Star game that 1 year, and that kind of made people realize, hey, we can do this. We could get John Scott in the All-Star game, and they did. So that kind of was the start of it all. You could thank Zemgus Girgensons for that. I think we already touched on the Hockey Hall of Fame. On Monday in Nashville will be the NHL Awards. I always love watching the NHL Awards. It's super fun to see who wins what. Obviously, there's some big things that I'll be cheering for in that day. We'll run through quickly each award and who you think is going to win it. Okay. So we will start with the Norris Trophy. Who does Frank Mueller think is going to win the Norris Trophy?
It's going to be Erik Karlsson. 6th ever D-man to notch 100 points. I mean, this just seems like a slam dunk.
For sure. I completely agree. I was a little surprised to see Cale Makar nominated. I didn't think he had like a Norris season, but I mean, obviously he did. I mean, I'm not going to really argue with it. He's Cale freaking Makar. He's Bobby Orr reincarnated. I know some older folks probably don't want to hear that.
There's got to be 3 nominees. So
yeah, I think McAvoy is deserving. I think Rasmus Dahlin is deserving. There are there's great defensemen in the NHL today, but I think even though he wasn't all that good defensively, I think the history behind the 100 points has to work in Erik Karlsson's favor in this one.
100%. I mean, look at Roman Josi last year. He almost got to the 100 points.
Yeah, he didn't He didn't win it.
He didn't win it. But if he would have got to the 100, it might have been a different story because I do still think he potentially got robbed there. That was his best
I would have
player.
voted for Yossi last year, personally.
Yeah, so would I have as well. And I mean, if he would have got 100 points, probably would have made a difference. And I think that's going to play into the favor of Erik Karlsson.
Yes. And more than any award in NHL history, I think the Norris Trophy has become like a lifetime achievement award. Cale Makar and Adam Fox both won it young, but we saw Drew Doughty win it in a year where he probably he should have won it in multiple years prior. Like that happens sometimes. Same thing with Giordano. But I know Karlsson has 2 already. He hasn't won one in a while, and this feels like a lifetime achievement plus getting to the 100-point mark and kind of revitalizing his career. He will be the winner of the Norris Trophy. Who do you think is going to win the Vezina Trophy?
Vezina also seems like a pretty slam dunk. I think it's going to be Linus Ullmark. 189 goals against average, 938 save percentage, 40 wins on a historic Bruins team. It just seems like that is the route that it's going to go.
We agree. We're 2 for 2. I think Linus Ullmark's a lock. I think Sorokin had an outstanding year, and so did Hellebuck. I think the 2 best goalies in the NHL are Vasilevsky and Shesterkin. But this year, based on the way Ullmark played and the team he was on and how he helped them, I mean, he took the starting job from Swayman, a younger, more likely piece to be the starting goalie in the year. And listen, he was hurt in the playoffs, and I think Jim Montgomery had probably the worst coaching performance of any team in the playoffs. By not leaving Ullmark in there injured after Game 5 was just a travesty. Swayman would have won one of those 3 games, and I couldn't believe that they did that. But Ullmark, it's a regular season award. He will be the winner of the Vezina Trophy. Frank, who do you think is going to win the Selke Trophy?
This is tough. It's between Bergeron and Nico for me. And I want to go Nico just because is Bergeron really going to win it for 6 times? I mean, nobody's ever won it 5 except for him. Is he really going to win it a 6th time? I mean, he very well could. I mean, the way the Bruins played and the way he played during the regular season, I mean, their historic season really could play in the factoring of him winning another Selke. So I'm going to go with Patrice Bergeron.
That's fair. I think Bergeron has a very good chance to win it. I think Marner, it's been a while since a winger's won it, and Marner's very good defensively. He's nominated for this thing for a reason. He's Patrick Elias. He's Hossa. He's Stone. He's a winger who's outstanding defensively and puts up a crap ton of points. But I don't see them giving it to the winger. I think face-ups and being the 200-foot player will play to the advantage of Hischier and Bergeron. But I'm going to pick Hischier. Why not? I mean, Bergeron could absolutely win. I'll let my bias be the tiebreaker. Hischier had 80 points, which was second onto the 3. Marner had the most out of all 3 of them. But, points aren't everything. There's defensive styles. There's the fact that Hischier's playing against Crosby and, whoever's the other team's top center. He's playing against Braden Point and Stamkos and Matthews and Tavares. When they're running through the Eastern Conference, he had Zibanejad in the playoffs at home. And then, he had to try and shut other things down when they were on the road in the playoffs. That's always his job, to playing the 200-foot game. And, the same thing goes for Bergeron. He's got, Tavares and Point and, the other Barkov, the other top centers in the league that they play against in the regular season and in the playoffs. But, I hope Hischier wins it this year. It's time to get some fresh blood. Let's start getting Hischier on track to break Bergeron's record for the most Selkes, because I do think he'll be in the mix for a large portion of the next, 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Frank, who do you think is going to win what's the one where it's voted by the players?
Oh,
the Ted Lindsay.
Yeah.
Do we just think the Ted Lindsay and the Hart Trophy are both going to be swept by one player?
Yep. And the Art Ross.
The Art Ross is already concluded.
And the Rocket Richard.
Yeah, that's already concluded. So we both agree that Mr. McDusty, number 97, Connor McDavid's going to take home the Hart Trophy and the Selke Trophy, or not Selke Trophy. I think he could win a Selke Trophy if he wanted to, though. Huh?
4 trophies. He's going to have 4 trophies this year.
Yes. We agree on that. There's really not much to talk about. Connor McDavid had one of the best offensive seasons in modern NHL history. The Oilers were sick, and it was largely because of him. He scored a crap ton of goals. He reached the 60-goal mark. I think the bigger debate is who comes in second for the Hart Trophy between Pasternak and Tkachuk.
It might be Tkachuk, just because
I think it's going to be Tkachuk.
I think it's going to be Tkachuk too, because I think if you took Tkachuk off the team, the Florida Panthers probably wouldn't even have made the playoffs. If you take Pasternak off the team, Bruins would have been okay. Bruins would have had a pretty good year. I think that matters if you think about it like that.
It's true, and the Bruins have a nominee for the Vezina Trophy, the Selke Trophy, and you can argue they have a snub on the Norris Trophy.
Exactly. So I think it's going to be Tkachuk for number 2.
I do too, and we'll find out all these statistics.
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to be the coach of the year?
Coach of the year is going to be Jim Montgomery. I hate to say it, but it's like Lindy Ruff right there, because it was the biggest turnaround from last to. But I don't know. It's really close. It's really close because a lot of these awards with the Bruins, I'm going because it was historic, something that's never happened before, right? That's the only reason I give the slightest lead to Jim Montgomery. But Lindy Ruff is right there. And Dave Hextall for the Kraken, I mean, it's great that they made it in the second year. I don't think he has a chance in hell to win it, to be honest with you. But it's going to be very close. I would not be surprised if Lindy Ruff won it, but I think it might be Jim Montgomery.
I think they got the 3 nominees very right.
Mm-hmm.
The Devils had the biggest turnaround in NHL history from point total from one season to the next. Montgomery's team broke the NHL record for wins in a season and points in a season and pretty much everything in a season. Without, they have a lot of stars on the team, but they played a true team game. And then the Kraken, second year, Dave Hextall, I think he is deserving of the nominee.
I might switch it to Lindy Ruff.
Wow. See, there are years where it goes to that guy who, hey, we thought you were going to suck, but you were actually really good, so here's Coach of the Year. There are also years where teams break historical records, and that coach wins it. John Cooper in Tampa, Barry Trotz in Washington. They won it in a year where they were just so significantly better than everybody else in the regular season. They choked in the playoffs to the Penguins, but then they won the cup the following year. But I honestly, this is one where I am the hardest on. I'm going Montgomery. I think Montgomery.
Right?
Yeah. I hope Lindy Ruff wins it because Devils, but I think this one's going to end up being
close.
I know it is close. It is really close. And then last but not least is the Lady Byng Trophy. This could go a multitude of different ways.
I think Jack Hughes got it locked up.
Okay, I'm going to pick Jack Hughes too.
I don't think there is a multitude of ways. I think it's not even close. I looked at the nominees, did my research. It's not even close.
Who are the other 2 nominees again? Because I knew I can't. Yeah, Point.
And, I can't think of the other one.
Yeah, I just knew I was going to pick Jack Hughes.
I know the other one had less penalty minutes than Jack Hughes, but not nearly as much production. I mean, you're almost 100-point score with 6 penalty minutes. It's not even close, VP.
Yeah, I agree. No, I completely agree. And he roughed it up in the playoffs, but luckily the votes are already in for the Lady Byng before the playoffs start. He tried to fight a couple people he tried to fight Aho. He lost a tooth. He was mucking it up in the playoffs with the Rangers, but that don't count in the postseason. That's almost what you need in the postseason. But in the regular season, Jack Hughes was very gentlemanly like.
What about the Calder? You weren't going to mention the Calder?
Oh, yeah. That is the one I forgot. The Calder Trophy.
Yep.
Who is going to win the Calder Trophy?
I called it when we were doing our predictions 25 podcasts ago. Matty Beniers, he led all rookies in points and helped lead his team to the postseason. I think hands down Matty Beniers.
Yep. I would go Beniers as well. I think he's going to win it. He was outstanding. He kind of proved there were some questions whether or not he could be a number 1 center when he was taken 2nd overall by the Kraken. Owen Power was always going to be the first pick, but people questioned the Kraken leaving Mason McTavish and Luke Hughes and Kent Johnson on the board. Well, they went with Beniers. I would say all 5 of those teams are happy with the guy they got. And Beniers is one of them. He is well deserving of the Calder Trophy.
Yep.
He will win it. Next year's Calder Trophy is going to piss me off almost the whole season because everybody's going to come into the season thinking Bedard and Fantilli are the only two that have a freaking chance to win it. But what people fail to realize every single time is that the 18-year-olds coming into the league almost never win it because there are rookies that are 3 years older than them that just make them look stupid. So give Luke Hughes respect going into next season when you're making your Calder Trophy predictions, you peasants.
I don't know, but if Bedard really pans out the way he should, he might.
He's gonna pan out the way he should.
Might have a
So is
really
Luke
good.
Hughes.
Yeah, but he might have a really good rookie year.
No, listen. I'm well aware. If next year's nominees are Hughes, Fantilli, and Bedard, I think hockey wins in general. Like hockey is the real winner there because that means we got to watch them all be freaking sweet for 82 games.
Yeah.
But yeah, Frank, that's our second period. Great stuff. The hockey world is on fire right now. Next week, things will really be burning up because we will have the 2023 NHL draft. 1 week from today, folks, Connor Bedard will become a Chicago Blackhawk and Adam Fantilli will become an Anaheim Duck. And then from there, we don't know, which is just so fun. Can't wait for next week. Next Wednesday is going to be radical. I'm pumped. I'm very, very pumped. This is good stuff.
Oh, you have no idea. I can't wait. Oh.
Absolutely. Well, Frank, we'll let you get out your I can't wait noises in period number 3. Welcome to period 3. Frank, it's been a while since we've done this, and I know while we were on vacation, there was a bit of news that broke in this world. There was a whole festival, kind of the new E3. Yeah, we'll call it
forever.
E3's done, but this is the new version of it. Frank, it's Frankie's Video Game Corner. Get into it.
I mean, there's a lot, so I'm not going to dive into each thing in depth. I'm just going to start rattling a bunch of things. For Summer Games Fest, something big announcements that were made. Spider-Man 2 got an October 20th release date this year. Mortal Kombat 1 got a gameplay trailer. Fortnite revealed the Transformers crossover event, which is really cool if you're into that stuff. There's a Lord of the Rings game coming out this fall. There's also a game that was announced called Pal World, which is basically Pokemon but with guns. Star Trek Infinite was announced, which we don't have a lot of Star Trek video games out there. So that was like the main Summer Games Fest takeaway that I kind of took in. I mean, right now, Diablo 4 has been the main game everybody's been playing. Final Fantasy 16 comes out tomorrow. I mean, we're in the mid of prime summer video gaming right now. There was a Nintendo Direct that happened today, and let me tell you, I knew it'd be big. I wrote about it. I said we're probably going to get stuff on Pikmin 4. I mean, we're probably going to get DLC for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, a little bit, in-depth look at that. But they hit us with some pretty big announcements. I have it pulled up. I mean, let's see. Hold on. Give me 1 second. So yeah, we did get our first deep dive into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the expansions that are coming out. On top of that, Detective Pikachu video game coming out in October. But then maybe some of the most exciting news, if you're a Super Nintendo fan, Super Mario RPG is getting remade, which is just unbelievable. That's one of the greatest Super Nintendo games of all time. And now it's getting remade for the Nintendo Switch. That's going to be huge when it comes out. We did get Pikmin 4 gameplay because that comes out in July, so that was exciting. There's WarioWare, a new WarioWare coming out again. Not only that, but a new Super Mario Bros. Is coming out, a 2D Super Mario Bros. Called Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I mean, we're just getting bombshells in the middle of summer for Super Mario games, like 2 new Mario games coming up. I mean, what the hell's going on? I mean, this was a huge broadcast that happened. A Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon's getting ported to the Nintendo Switch next year. I mean, there's just so much. I mean, literally, there's so much that got announced today, and it's so amazing. There's a Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom new amiibo, Zelda and Ganon amiibo coming out during the holiday season this year. I mean, in a 40-minute show, they just dropped bombshells. I mean, this is probably the most video game news we've had over the summer because normally the summer's kind of the lull, right? You have the beginning of the year, January through March, hits you with big games. Last year, they hit us with Elden Ring. This year, they hit us with Hogwarts Legacy and Tears of the Kingdom that came out earlier this year. And then all of a sudden, during the summer now, we're getting Bombshells, and that's usually towards holiday season we get those games. Right? Gets ready for the holidays and great money makers for the holidays. I mean, there's been a ton going on, and it's incredible. I love it. This has been great. I'm really excited for these new Mario games that are coming out.
That's outstanding. I literally can't wait. The Mario game, what did you say it was called?
So there's Super Mario Bros. Wonder. It's 2D.
Wonder. That's
It's,
the one I
it's
was, yeah.
2D, which is any Super Mario game I'm in.
Yeah,
I
same.
love Mario. And then they're recreating Super Mario RPG, which is one of the greatest like Mario games of all time. Definitely one of the greatest for this SNES. So that's going to be really, really cool because they don't really remake Mario games that much. They remake other games. They'll remake your favorite whatever, but remaking an iconic Mario game in the franchise, it's actually really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. I'm excited to play them. I can't wait for those amiibo.
Yeah,
Zelda's going strong, and it's obviously, it's impacted by having the amiibo. Skylar wants to know if we saw the Mario movie. Frank and I actually just watched it together for the first time ever. Frankie fell asleep for most of it, so I don't even know how much he retains. He's got to rewatch it.
I got to rewatch it for sure. I mean, I remember like most of it,
but it wasn't for a lack of the movie being sick.
I was so tired.
I know. You know what? I forced myself to stay awake because I loved it. I actually really liked it.
I'm gonna rewatch it.
I hope they create a whole universe. There are so many references in the movie that hint at that's going to be the case.
I mean, the ending, that post-credit scene.
Yeah, exactly. They can make a whole multiverse of this shit.
And they will.
They could end up in Hyrule. They could do the Luigi's Mansion thing. They could hit Donkey Kong Kingdom. Like, they could do the whole thing.
Absolutely.
They could do the whole thing. And I hope they do. Is that all you got in the Frank video game corner?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I was just spewing because there's just so much right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically it.
For sure. Frank, speaking of movies, I just saw The Flash.
Yeah,
it was good. I went in knowing I never had to care about these characters ever again because they're resetting. The DCEU is going away, and we're going to start the DCU with Superman next. And James Gunn, the director of all the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and whatnot, he will be in charge. So there's high hopes that the DCU will start to compare with the MCU. I really hope it does because those characters are cool. I like Superman. I like Batman. The characters were cool in this movie, and it even though the movie kind of stunk, but like it was, I enjoyed the characters. Skylar points out Michael Keaton was in it playing Batman. He was awesome. I thought it was great. And the character of Batman himself and the character of the Flash himself, they're interesting people. So, I hope James Gunn does this thing the right way. Superman with Supergirl and all those sorts of Kryptonian villains and stuff. I hope they do a good job because I think it could be just as successful as the MCU. And one thing DC has going for them that Marvel didn't was multiple recognizable characters. Really, the only Marvel character that people knew before the MCU started was Spider-Man, and Spider-Man wasn't even allowed to be in the MCU until the late 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
So, they built Iron Man from scratch. They built Captain America from scratch. They built Thor from scratch. Nobody gave a crap about those characters in 2005, right? They weren't, that's the exact opposite for for DC. People know Superman. People know Batman.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they can really do this thing right, and I hope they do.
I think they will. They're in good hands. I like James Gunn.
I agree. Frank, baseball season's fully in swing of things, and the Cincinnati Reds have won 11 straight games. They just won today. Kind of feel bad for like the Cubs.
Cubs are hot right now.
They've been hot, and it doesn't matter because the freaking Reds have won 11 in a row.
It's just unbelievable.
It's unreal. In the NL Central Division, everybody thinks it's nice and poopy. Well, guess what? Not anymore. The Cubs and the Giants have won 9 in a row, but we expect the Giants to be good year after year. And that's always nice. Winning 9 in a row doesn't ever really happen, so good on them. But man, the Reds have been on fire. And I know I promised a Reds heavy crosstown crosstalk last week. Well, sometimes things don't go according to plan. There's technology issues. There's guest issues. Well, that kind of happened last week, and I did a solo show. I still talked Reds. I talked heavy Reds, but the winning streak wasn't what it is now. I actually think it was a blessing in disguise because tomorrow we're going to have 2 Reds guests.
Wow.
So we're going to be talking Reds.
That's more than one.
That is more than one. That is more than one, and it's going to be a heavy Reds episode. I'm actually going to the White Sox game tonight, too, so we're going to check out the Texas Rangers as well, the first-place Texas Rangers. We'll see how that goes. So lots of Major League Baseball to be watched and to be talked about. What were you going to say?
What's going on with Luis Arraez? Again today, I think he was 2 for 4.
I'm so happy he's not on the Twins anymore.
He was either 2 for 4 or 2 for 5, which would bring it up regardless. I mean, he got up to batting average of 401 today. Then he dropped to 399. And then I don't remember what happened, but even if he finished, he's right there at 400. And he's not going to finish the season at 400, but it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, only one person ever has finished over 400, and played a full season. I'm not talking about a rookie who came up, went 2 for 5, and then got sent back down, or 2 for 4 and got sent right back down. But he'll finish. He'll probably win another batting title for the second year in a row. He went 5 for 5 a couple days ago. The White Sox actually shut him down for the most part. He had a hit in every game, but his batting average sunk. And that's the thing with a guy like Luis Arraez and what he's doing right now. A hit a game doesn't cut it. You need multiple hits a game to keep your average over 400.
Today.
Yeah, and he went 5 for 5 a couple days ago to get it back over 400. He'll rotate all season long. He'll get hot. I don't know if he'll finish in the high 3s, but he'll finish in the 3s enough where he probably wins the batting title. Again, I don't love batting average, but for someone like a Luis Arraez, I do like it because he's a leadoff hitter. That's kind of like his mojo. That's his thing. It doesn't matter if he hits home runs. It matters if he scores runs, and you score runs by getting on base. He does that. Love what I'm seeing from him. We'll talk about Luis Arraez tomorrow on Crosstown Crosstalk at 2 p.m. Very much looking forward to that. Make sure you tune in.
Before you switch topics, have you watched College World Series at all?
Yeah, my guys at LSU.
Yeah,
let's go.
Big game today. That's going to be a good game.
Hell yeah.
I'm going to talk about that later.
Go Tigers. Go Tigers. I think you're going to talk about it right now in America's favorite podcast segment of the week, Breaking Bets.
Where's my money, bitch?
Make it happen.
Canceled.
All right. Anyway. Thank you for watching, everyone.
All right. So last week, 2 for 3. Great. Happy about that. Brought our percentage back up to the 50 burger. If I could find the graphic. Yep. There we go. Yeah. This week I'm going quality over quantity. Instead of 3 picks, I'm giving 2. 2 that I really like. All right. So we're going to try and go 2 for 2. I'm going to start off with the MLB. Talk about teams that are hot in the MLB. The Braves are hot right now. They've won 7 in a row. How do you feel about that, VP? I know you're a Braves guy.
Braves.
You're a Braves guy. They won 7 in a row. They're one of the hottest teams in the league right now.
Best team in the league.
If there was a night for their win streak to end, though, it would be tonight with Smith-Shawver on the mound against Aaron Nola. Listen, Smith-Shawver's been great. He's pitched really well for the Braves. He's pitched in 3 games this year, but the lineups he's faced, he pitched against the Rockies. Rockies absolutely stink. He pitched against the Nationals. They're 3-13 in June. I mean, the best team he's pitched against is the Diamondbacks, and he didn't go that long. He went 2 innings or something in that game. So let's see what he could do on the road when he has to face a tough Phillies lineup. When you got to face Trey Turner, when you got to face Nick Castellanos, when you got to face Bryce Harper. We're going to see what he could do. I like the Phillies money line tonight at -139. I think they get to the kid tonight, and I think the Braves win streak ends at 7. I love the Phillies money line -139. Now, Wake Forest and LSU. Matchup of the night for baseball. Wake Forest, number 1 ranked in the country. LSU ranked number 5. These teams met last week, and I got the luxury to put it on and, watch a little bit of the game. LSU had Wake Forest on the verge of a loss. Wake Forest rallied to win the game 3-2. It was so close for LSU. But I think LSU could fix any holes in their game and give Wake Forest their first loss of the College World Series tonight. LSU money line is plus 110. I believe it's double elimination. And LSU already lost. Wake Forest has not. I think Wake Forest has a chance to, go pretty deep in the College World Series, which is why they could suffice one loss tonight. But I like the value with LSU when they put them on the brink the other night. I think they have what it takes to get it done. LSU money line plus 110 plus. They just beat Tennessee yesterday. I believe it was yesterday, and that was a good game. They got a good lineup. I don't care if that number next to her name's 5. I think they could do it. LSU money line plus 110.
Very good. Frankie's making everybody money. Here comes the money. I hope LSU wins. That'd be nice.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. Go Tigers. The last time LSU played a team from the ACC in a championship, things went well for them.
Yeah.
Things went well for them. Oh, man, football. It's coming. It's coming. The football blogs have been coming in full force, too, with the Jags and the Bears lately.
Oh, yeah.
So that's been loads and loads of fun. I can't thank everybody enough for watching. This has been a great show. I really enjoyed Byron Bader.
Oh,
it was incredible.
He's fantastic.
It was incredible. So getting down and dirty with the stats and whatnot, it's been cool. So we'll be keeping stuff like that going all summer long. Hockey doesn't go away on Bardown. We keep it going. I can't thank everybody enough for watching at home. Make sure you tune in tomorrow to Crosstown Crosstalk at 2 p.m. Read my stuff at Fansided, the 5 sites that I am writing for, 2 of them as a contributor, 3 of them as a site expert, and then Frankie's a contributor to apptrigger.com, where he's going over all those video games he just got done talking about at length. Hell yeah, Frank. Good stuff. Draft next week. Huge show next week.
Can't wait for that. It's going to be great. I'm going to be overly excited next Wednesday. But before we get to next Wednesday, I will be also tuning in to Secret Invasion, Marvel's new show that kicked off today. I can't wait to watch it. So yeah, thought I'd just add that in there for people.
Absolutely. Very, very good. Got to watch that as well. Yeah, make sure you tune in tomorrow to Crosstown Crosstalk. I'll be going all over the baseball things we just talked about at great length. 2 Reds guests. Looking forward to it. Be at the game tonight. If you're there, come say hello. If you see me, buy me a beer. Yeah, that's it. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. It has been a great thing to talk about hockey as much as we have, and we ain't going nowhere, folks. Frank, is there anything you want to say before we close it out? You heard it from the man himself. As always, thank you to everybody. We enjoy you very much. We will see you next week for our draft extravaganza. As always, thank you for listening.